Hi, I'm Mike Crowley. My guest today on Inside Tacoma is Randy Lewis, the Government Relations Director for the City of Tacoma, who is retiring after 28 years. Welcome, Randy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you taking over my show.
Kind of reverses roles, doesn't it, Randy?
A little bit,
Yeah.
a little bit. So 28 years, a long time.
It is a long time. So, Randy, when you were hired 28 years ago, did the job description include being the host of television shows?
No, it did not. That was something that came along just a handful of years later when the TV Tacoma folks, who've always done great programming and award-winning programming over the years, had the idea of having me sit here and talk to somebody for 30 minutes was going to be good television. So somehow we've survived all this time.
Well, you've done a great job. As somebody who's been interviewed by you, you've done a great job. So tell me about the changes, some of the changes that you've seen in those 28 years.
Well, about 6 different city managers and 5 or 6 mayors, including you, over that period of time, and countless numbers of council members to get to know over the years, some of whom keep coming back after, even after being gone for a while. But anyway, but the city just kind of goes on and continues to provide important services to folks, deals with emerging problems. We went through a horrible recession, in the late O's, and that we had layoffs for the first time and the only time that I've worked with the city where we had major layoffs, curtailed lots of services. It took a long time to build our way out of that, and thankfully the council at that time hired T.C. Broadnax from San Antonio, Texas, who was touted to be a budget expert, somebody who could fix structural problems in budgets. And he certainly did that here and put the city on a solid foundation for when the economy turned around and started growing, and turned around and left, went back to Texas after just 5 years. But I have to tell you, as someone who was nearing retirement, the council again did exactly the right thing. If they were thinking of me, which I'm sure they weren't, in hiring Elizabeth Pauley, a longtime colleague as city attorney, and someone. It's just great as you're going into the latter years of your career to have somebody you've known for a long time, and there's no surprises. This is a solid person who has a good view and direction and grip on how the city operates and how it should operate, and it's going to be in great hands. And then with a good council and mayor. Yeah, and I'm going to continue to be a resident, so I'll have some things to say about that at the polling place, when I cast my vote. But it's, I think Tacoma's in pretty good shape right now.
Good, and I agree with you about Elizabeth, and my association with her was when she was in the city attorney's office, but very capable in that role, and certainly as city manager.
Right.
So talk about maybe some of the highlights of your career, and along with highlights come some lowlights. So talk to us about that as well.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that I focus a lot on state things because even though I was also responsible for our federal relations over a long period of that time, I've had an assistant who's handled that mostly for us over the last several years. And so even though we've had some great successes in terms of getting some federal grant money and some federal program funds, including things like the money for Sound Transit 2 and all that sort of thing that came through here. And I was involved in all that. I'm going to focus at the state level. I think there's two things. There's a policy thing that I'm really proud of that we worked on, and then there's some capital kinds of things as well. And the policy thing is this one of these esoteric kinds of programs that some folks have some issues with. It's called the Multifamily Housing Tax Abatement. And it was done as a tool after the state legislature passed the Growth Management Act, which said fundamentally different things than the law had been before, which was that growth was supposed to occur in cities. It wasn't supposed to be sprawl. We were supposed to have direct growth into cities. Well, if you're going to do that, there needed to be some kind of incentives to cause that to happen. And the planning staff at the City of Tacoma came up with that bill. They conceived of it and actually handed it to me as a written document. I mean, I didn't have to, it wasn't my idea. It was professionals in our planning department that said, if we're going to have to increase density and do all these things and redevelop in Tacoma, we need a tool to do that. And that's where that law, which exempts the housing portion of new construction for housing or rehabilitation of housing, exempts that portion of the project from property taxes, originally for 10 years and then later changed to 8 or 12, depending on whether there's affordable housing. And so I'm really proud of that. I mean, Tacoma has made use of that extensively over the years. Lots of other cities across the state have done it. And there was a clamor. Originally, there was a threshold of population that was available, but other cities wanted it, and the legislature kept ramping that threshold down to, I think it's now 15,000 or more. And now it's even going to change even further, where even in unincorporated areas of counties, as long as they're on high-capacity transit lines, like the future bus rapid transit by Pierce Transit on Pacific Avenue, it makes sense to do it there as well, because those are areas that are certainly going to see some density and some growth. I'm really proud of that project. It passed through the excellent and always fascinating to watch legislative leadership of Lorraine Wojahn, longtime Tacoma legislator, candidate for mayor once upon a time, and just a legend in Olympia. And she took that on as her champion project, and we got that passed in one session, that major piece of legislation. So that's the thing I'm proudest of in terms of policy, because I think it's made a difference and still makes a difference all the time around Tacoma. Project-wise, getting some money from the state for some big thing that the city needed. The biggest one by far is the convention center, which is a building that we were able to build without having to cut some corners and say, well, it'd be nice to have this, but we really can't afford that, because there's enough state money in that thing that the city was able to actually build what it needed. And you can see the hotel being built next to it right now, which was something that we absolutely needed to have and would not happen if we hadn't built a quality convention center of the right size. Much as I say that, the one that was the most fun to do was securing some state money that allowed us to rebuild Cheney Stadium. Because I found some legislators in doing that project that were so passionate about baseball and especially baseball at the AAA level, because it's affordable and it's family oriented, and they could go to those games, and when they couldn't watch the Mariners on TV or listen to them on the radio or their favorite major league team from across the country, but they went to the Rainiers games, or whatever the Rainiers were called in earlier days. And that one was the absolute most fun to do, because everybody had a really good time working on that piece of legislation, and that was some state money that allowed us to convince the out-of-state owners of the team at the time that we were serious about this, and then they signed the long-term lease, which allowed for the rest of the improvements that put Cheney Stadium where it is today. And the new owners are making such great use of that facility with the soccer teams and the women's soccer team. I mean, it's been lots of fun to have been involved in that.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on those three issues. And I was fortunate enough to be involved with the housing issue, the tax abatement as well. And I am proud of the small role that I played in that as well. And while I wasn't around for Cheney Stadium, it's a fabulous facility, and very happy that the state saw the light and was able to allow that and provide some funds for that to happen.
Well, it's especially true because, Washington, there's this really weird quirk here in Washington State, is we do not like to spend money on stadiums.
Right.
That we have two very large ones in Seattle, but those were one of them was a statewide vote of the people, and then the other one was a special deal done, which some legislators felt they would never let that happen again. And so when the CenturyLink field came along later, even though Paul Allen paid for a big chunk of it, the statewide vote was what made that actually happen. Then later the Sonics tried to do something similar, and they're not even here anymore as a result. And the state is just does not like paying for money for stadiums. Everybody loves the UW Husky football, but when the UW asked for state money to rebuild Husky Stadium, they were told, no. You go talk to your alumni about that. And so it was a challenge getting them to pay attention to something as small as AAA baseball.
Right.
And even the way we were able to get it done is because we even went down to single A baseball. There's 4 single A teams in Washington State, and by combining the 4 of them with the 1 triple A team in Tacoma, we were able to get enough supporters across the state in key districts that made that work. And Tacoma needed $5 million, but working with the other cities, we asked for 10, and we were able to get it, because that's when these great folks like Margarita Prentice from Renton or Jeannie Darnielle in Tacoma, who are passionate baseball fans. And I can tell you, if you go to a baseball game with Jeannie, plan to spend the night there. If it turns out to be a 15-inning game, you're going to be there until the 15th inning because she does not leave. But it was that kind of passion about baseball that made that happen.
Great. Well, I still go to Cheney Stadium and watch my share of baseball games too. So enough serious business. So what are you and Cora planning for retirement? Tell me about trips or what else you have in mind for your retirement.
Well, having been involved in public policy as long as I have, at the chamber and actually covering government for a defunct radio station in Tacoma, and then working at the city for all these years, I'm not going to just shut that out. I'm not going to keep lobbying for other clients or anything like that. I'm done with that. But I'd still like to be involved somehow in either explaining public policy to the public or helping push it through, maybe a city council or something like that, be part of a group that's working on something in particular, whatever expertise I might have to that, because I think it's how we do stuff, and cities are really the laboratories of democracy. We call the states the laboratories of democracy in the national level, because states frequently do things and then Congress catches up, many years later. But at the state level, that happens with cities. The cities were the ones who started the minimum wage movement. The cities were the ones that started the legalization of marijuana, or liberalization at least first, and then legalization later. That all started with cities acting on their own and pushing the state to take action. So I'm a big fan of that kind of citizen-based government, taking things to their elected officials and making the case for that kind of thing. So if I can find a way to do that, be involved in that, that would be an ideal thing for me. But yes, we're going to travel. My wife and I do like to go to Scotland, and we've been there many times, and I imagine we'll figure out a way or two to get there a few more times, and because it's a tiny country, but we haven't seen all of it yet.
So heritage, Scottish heritage?
I have some Scottish heritage, and then she's just kind of fallen in love with the place. So that's why we both kind of like going back to the same place all the time.
Okay. Well, my wife and I took a trip to Ireland 2 years ago, and for us, we loved every minute of it except for the driving. So
yes.
Be careful.
Yes, driving on the other side of the road. People ask me about that all the time, and I said, well, really, it's not that hard because everybody else is doing it. So you kind of forced yourself to get on the right side of the road, but their standards for roads are a lot different than ours are here.
You say standards.
Yes, sometimes there are standards. Yeah. But yeah, so we'll do a little bit of that.
Okay, well, you brought it up a little earlier, but I remember you from your former life when you were with the Chamber of Commerce. So tell us a little bit about that. Not everybody knows that you at one time were with the Chamber.
Right, I spent 8 years at the Chamber as their Government and Community Issues Manager. That was the title. And so I worked very closely with the city and the city council on things that the chamber cared about, as well as then some other community kinds of things, military affairs and education issues that the chamber was involved in. So that's how I got to know a lot of staff at the city and I mean, I'd been a reporter for a while, but you get to really know them when you're working on a project that the chamber is concerned with, or the chamber is being consulted by the city about something. And I was frequently the voice of that, and bringing chamber members along to meet with city officials. So it was a great job in terms of getting myself exposed to a lot of the business leaders in the community. I mean, I met you there when you were anticipating a political career, and you had your bus signs with your face on them all over the city for your business, which I even remember the name of, Dankin Jewelers. So yeah, so memory's still good in most cases. But Yeah, I mean, I met a lot of folks who I worked with at the city for years and years afterwards from my connections at the chamber. And Dave Graybill was my boss. He's still around, and someone who gave me a lot of experience and opportunities, which I think made me a better person for the job at the city.
Well, great. Well, I think you've done a great job here. You certainly did a great job at the chamber as well.
So it was that was a lot of fun. And can I ask you a couple questions now? Are we gonna?
Well, all right.
Oh, can we do that? Okay. So obviously there is life after public office, because you served on the council and then as mayor for a period of time. And now the way you became mayor was probably not the way you'd prefer to become mayor.
It was way easier than running a campaign.
Okay, but you were in office during a really controversial time. I mean, we had an actual energy crisis involving our utilities. Well, you became mayor, and the Tacoma Power folks came in and said they needed a 100% surcharge added to their utility rates, and you had to do it right now. And the council said, why didn't you come back with a plan B?
You're exactly right. My last meeting as a city council member, that issue was brought up, and the next morning I woke as the mayor trying to deal with it and heading off to Washington, D.C. to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, where we tried to deal with it at a federal level as well. So for me, the energy crisis was a very, very difficult issue to deal with, to tell people we were going to have to raise their utility rates significantly, when a lot of people struggle to make the utility payment on a monthly basis anyway. So, and businesses that their rates were going to go up tremendously. So while we all ended up supporting it, it was a difficult issue for all of us to deal with.
And this is not, the Tacoma Power is in a completely different place today than it was then. But as I recall, one thing that you led the charge on was on conservation had to play a role in making sure that we didn't have to do a 100% surcharge. It was actually, I think later 50% surcharge
Right.
is what was adopted. And the utility had to do some cutbacks and do some other things. But you pushed them on conservation, and the utility did not believe people would conserve back then to the level that needed to be done. But you were proven right.
We were, and I mean, it certainly wasn't me. I led the effort only because I was in the mayor's chair. But we did some crazy things to bring attention to it. We had council members pedaling a bicycle to power the lights for the city council chambers. We had TPU, TV Tacoma actually, come over to my house with my granddaughter, and we went through the different parts of the house and showed people how they could save by turning the heat on their water heater down and other crazy things. So I had a very young granddaughter, our first granddaughter, Hannah at that time, who took part in the filming of that as well.
But it turned out, as I recall, if I'm remembering the numbers right, it was like about, the goal was 5%, but the public exceeded that significantly, like maybe 10 or 12% in conservation efforts that helped through that crisis, which kind of said, yeah, the public does know the value of conservation. And again, like I said, that Tacoma Power is in a very different place now. They talk about conservation all the time and the importance of it, and so it's certainly a sea change there. But that was a crisis moment, and it was brought about because of some crazy idea that grew out of California that we should let the market decide who you get your energy from. So we were going to deregulate local electricity sales. And so theoretically at my home in Northeast Tacoma, I could have chosen whether Tacoma Power provided my electricity or Pacific Gas and Electric in California or maybe Con Edison in New York. Any one of them could have provided electricity to my house, which that seemed like free market kind of gone a little askew.
It had gone crazy. And when I went back to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I expected to be met by mayors with exactly the same feelings I had. But some of the cities weren't in that same position because they were controlled or employed great numbers of people by Con Edison and other providers. So
wow.
It was a little different greeting than I had expected.
Yeah, we're a little, yeah, even for a business-oriented guy like you, and I mean, you're a businessman before you began your public career. Washington's still kind of known as a place where public power is a very important thing. It was one of the, I mean, I think Nebraska is the state that has 100% public power, but Washington's certainly up there in terms of the percentage of people who get their electricity through publicly owned utilities. It's kind of a part of the heritage of Washington State is, no, that's something we don't let the private sector do. We prefer public power. And the city charter enshrined that, you know, in 1953 when it was adopted by the voters. So it's kind of an interesting period of time. And like I said, you became mayor under a difficult circumstance, and then that was your first crisis to deal with. So those were eventful times. And then we had an attempt by another city in Washington State to prohibit the city of Tacoma from taxing our utilities, which would have cost us millions of dollars, which had nothing to do with Tacoma. It had to do with them fighting with Seattle, but they poorly drafted a bill that threw us into the mix as well. And so we were making you weigh in on things like that.
You did. Well, and at the same time, that same year, so a 12-month period, I was able to deal with a major earthquake that we had.
Yes, the earthquake.
The earthquake, and then of course September 11th took place. Not that it was in Tacoma, but it was something that affected all of us tragically. So three major issues, and then you were talking baseball a little earlier. There was the real threat at that time that we were going to lose AAA baseball. So I took any effort that I could do to try and keep AAA baseball here in Tacoma.
Right. That's last time was not our first time facing that crisis.
Right.
But I think hopefully we've secured that now with a new stadium and local ownership of the team again, which is I think the key to this. Well, so after you served as mayor and your time on the council, I know you didn't just disappear. You were busy in the community, but let's let people know what you were doing.
Well, after I left office here in Tacoma, I was hired by the Pierce County Master Builders Association. So I ran the local Master Builders Association for 10 years, and then reached retirement age and trundled happily off into retirement.
So you didn't want to go back into retail? That was your foreground.
That was, but for a small business guy, it's very increasingly difficult to make a decent living, to make any living as a small independent business. So no, I didn't want to, and I think the master builders came to me and asked. I didn't know there was an opening, but I think they recognized that I had management experience, I had governmental experience, and so they felt that it would be a good fit, and so I lasted there for 10 years.
That was a time also when, at the state level, the statewide organization of master builders was always in war with the legislature about policy, about everything. But that was never true here. I mean, the master builders here in city and county governments maybe didn't agree on every issue, but they talked to each other, and it wasn't shooting missiles at each other like it was at the state level for a long period of time.
It wasn't. I mean, we absolutely did disagree with some local policies, more at the county level, certainly at the state level, but our approach was way different than the approach our state association took. So we've always felt we'd rather work with local governments, maybe work to get new people elected, but to do it in a respectful manner. And so that was my style, and I'm very happy it was a style of the board of directors that I was able to deal with.
Now, do you still get in touch with the folks from the home builders and things? Because this is certainly an interesting time for them. In Tacoma, the hottest real estate market. I mean, it's hard to even picture a few years ago saying those words, Tacoma, the hottest real estate market.
And no, I have separated myself from the builders, from local government, so I'm happily retired, spending time with my 4 grandchildren and other things that occupy me.
Okay, all right. So, what do you think, though, with that history of being the former mayor and also working with master builders? When somebody says Tacoma's the hottest real estate market in the nation right now, I mean, is that something you'd ever would have thought you would hear?
Well, there was a little portion of my career after I left retail and before I went to the master builders that I also sold real estate. So I had a good exposure to the market at that time. And to try and find $1 million listing in the Tacoma area at that time was virtually impossible. Now you can find numerous $1 million homes in the greater Tacoma area. So it is a huge difference. And my daughter and her husband right now are buying a new home. And of course, when you buy a new home, you have to sell the existing home. So we're going to be able on a first name basis to watch this process right now.
Yeah, we had a bidding war for a house next door to us in northeast Tacoma that was for sale, and it was just kind of wow. Maybe we should consider something, but no, we're not moving, not at all. We've decided, nope, that's not going to happen. The house is nearly paid for. We're going to stay there and just travel to Scotland from there and have a nice place to come back to. Because we both like living here in Tacoma. Both my kids are now living in Tacoma, and they're both homeowners in Tacoma. So it's kind of great that the whole family's here, and it's a good time to go into retirement.
It is. I totally agree. Well, one thing, Randy, that you're aware of that I've been doing in retirement is my friend Bob Wilkes and I, on occasion, every month or every 2 weeks, go visit hamburger joints in the area. And then we do a rating system on the hamburger. And it's kind of an internal rating that we only give to people that ask for it. But we're looking for a third member of our review team. So if you've got any interest.
Wow.
We could use you. We also have been asked to do a blog about our rating of hamburgers, and we don't know how to do a blog. So I know you have a journalism background. You can help set up our blog for us.
Wow, a chance to eat hamburgers as a job. Wow. Well, let me give that some thought.
Right. We would. You can come as a guest the first time and do a guest review.
All right. Well, I may take you up on that. Thank you very much for being here today, though. It's been great seeing you again and catching up. And I'm delighted that they were able to get you in here to come and surprise me on the show like this. And you did a great job hosting, so maybe there's another opportunity there.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Randy.
Our guest has been former Mayor Mike Crowley. We look forward to seeing you again here on Inside Tacoma.